Villains are a huge part of media, and in this case, video games. They are the guys that you are on a mission to take down, but some villains you just can't help but enjoy every moment they appear on screen. But for every awesome enemy, there is one that is so terrible at being a villain that you'll just want to have a word with the developers. I'm going to talk about these villains, whether they be generic, unthreatening, or have questionable motivations. Because I can't find 10 terrible villains that are the main antagonists, they don't have to be the main villain, but they have to play a big role in the plot, so no random final bosses like Necron. I haven't played Final Fantasy IX anyways. This list isn't based on if I find them to be bad villains, but they're villains that I don't like all that much. Now prepare to see 10 villains that I don't find interesting in the slightest.
Now you wouldn't hurt a lady, would you?
Some villains in the Kirby universe seem to only be there because they ran out of villain ideas. But it seems like the only one out of them that is entirely unoriginal is Dark Nebula. I don't mind how he didn't appear until the final world of the game, because at least he has one world of build-up, but when he was revealed, it came straight out of nowhere. And he's just like most other villains in the Kirby series with even less personality or backstory. And according to the Japanese version, he was apparently Zero before he was killed. He was revived and somehow reborn as this thing? I don't get it. But why did I put him at number 10? Because when he possesses Daroche, that fight is just awesome. Because Dark Daroche's attacks are an astounding sight. But the fight against Dark Nebula is decent, because it does have awesome abilities. But other than that, not much else going for it other than the fact that you get the triple star ability. It's definitely a much better fight than Dark Matter from Dreamland 2. But still not anything spectacular. But I can safely say that I can at least tolerate it compared to some of the later entries on this list. Okami had two primary villains, a giant 8-headed dragon named Orochi, and the root of all evil known as Yami. So what do we get in the sequel? A dark eyeball with teeth buried in a pile of purple throw-up. His role in the plot isn't all that memorable, and unlike Orochi and Yami, who had some pretty intense build-up for half the game, Akuro seems like he only appeared because they needed a villain, and because of that he just comes off as plain forgettable. At least Dark Nebula had a memorable Daroche fight, Orochi was memorable for being very intimidating, Yami was memorable for his epic final battle, and Akuro was memorable for, what was he memorable for? Heck, I found Kuro, the guy he manipulated, to be more memorable than him. I felt bad for him when we were forced to kill him because of the time we spent together. Not that Akuro is a terrible villain, but he doesn't interest me that much because he's kind of underwhelming compared to Yami in my mind. Sure, he has a bit more personality, but in the end, he just struck me as more of a filler villain than anything else. Personally, I think that the Subspace Emissary gets a lot more hate than it deserves, but I'll admit that the final boss was something that they should not be proud of. He's just some strange Data-like man with evil powers. Pretty much nothing else about his actual character. At least Master Hand showed some anger, but Taboo has no emotion whatsoever. Also, he isn't even mentioned until the end of the game. I can understand if a villain isn't seen until the final fight because it leaves you thinking, wow, I wonder what this guy will be like. But Taboo literally appeared out of nowhere, repelling both Master Hand and Ganondorf. Because of that, we didn't get to fight either of them in the Subspace Emissary. Nope, I'm not playing that overused song. I would excuse this if he had some actual personality, but he doesn't. I know he was meant to be a last-minute reveal villain, but I didn't find him to be that much of a likable one at that. Also, how is he able to cast a force field to repel both Ganondorf and Master Hand, but he can't use it to repel Sonic? I don't get it. The reason he isn't any higher is because he has an actually good backstory. That being said, they don't want you to know it until after you beat the game. As a result, the fight doesn't feel like it has much of a meaning to it. His death is pretty satisfying though. I know I said I don't want anything to do with Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric ever again, but I have to bring it up in order to put Lyric on the list. I mean, how did we go from a giant water beast that destroyed an entire city to an evil demon that's probably the Sonic equivalent of the devil himself and can set the entire world on fire within minutes, to a creature that can bend the very fabric of time, to this weird lizard thing? Anyways, General Scales Wannabe is unmemorable compared to most Sonic villains. First, how can you take a villain seriously with a name like Lyric? Second, his goal to destroy all life and rebuild the world in this image, which has already been done before by many other villains. And his concept of being a 1,000-year-old demon that's being resurrected has already been done plenty of other times. In addition to that, he has very little personality. And in Shattered Crystal, he dies in the most cliched way possible. He falls to his death. All this makes him a very disappointing villain compared to the ones we've gotten in the past 20 years. Grima from Fire Emblem Awakening is simply put one of the most unoriginal villains in gaming in my opinion. Let's look at his name, Grima. That's one of the most ridiculous villain names I've ever heard. And then there's his lack of personality. This wouldn't bother me so much if he had something to make up for it, but he doesn't. And his concept is cliched as all heck because it's been done like dozens of other times. An evil dark dragon that's being resurrected. Well, you fight on top of a dragon, which is kinda cool, but that doesn't make up for it. And since he's dealt with like a normal boss in Awakening, the fight can feel very underwhelming if you surround him with several units. It's even worse if you have the Falchion. You can kill him instantly by pairing him up with someone. The only original thing is that if Crumb kills it, it gets sealed away for another 1,000 years, but if you kill it, it dies and will never come back, but your avatar will no longer exist. That's different, but let's see what happens if you choose the latter. You're still brought back simply through the will of friendship. So it's as if that original concept isn't even there. You'd think that all of media everywhere would have learned from this stupid cliche after Pokemon the first movie. Bottom line, Grima is a lame villain. What? But Dr. Wily is awesome! How could he be on the list? Well, to me he was awesome, but as the series went on, he became less and less threatening. He's always the main villain of every classic Mega Man game. But wait, what about Bowser? Doesn't he suffer from the same problem? Yes, but there's a difference. Bowser may not be exactly the greatest villain out there, and he may do the same thing most of the time. He at least does it with something interesting about it. Wily, on the other hand, handles this in the most insulting way possible. In nearly every game starting out with Mega Man 4, they always tried to mislead us into thinking there would be a different villain, only for it to turn out to be Dr. Wily again. I would be okay with this, but again, nearly every Mega Man game after the 4th installment has this situation, making it get increasingly obvious, dull, and repetitive. In Mega Man 4, the game has us led to believe that Dr. Kozak is the main villain until it reveals that he's being controlled by Dr. Wily, who is kidnapping his daughter. In Mega Man 5, Proto Man appears to be the villain until it turns out that this one was an imposter created by Dr. Wily. In Mega Man 6, oh my gosh! Do they really think we're this stupid? I tried to forgive Wily for this in 4 and 5, but this is officially the straw that broke the camel's back. Just how insulting he is to the gamer's intelligence is enough to put him on the list. Now he'll have to do something super impressive in Mega Man 11 in order to redeem himself, but then again, that'll probably never come out. And if it does, Wily will probably still do this. Dr. Wily, you officially fail forever. Congratulations!
Don't make me cry and ruin my makeup!
Like I said in my top 10 games I love and hate list, Team Flare is completely unoriginal in my opinion because of their cliched motivation of destroying all humans to make the world a better place. And it just so happens that this team is led by Lysandre. Before making the list, I was confused if I should put him on here or not because I didn't want to risk getting too much hate mail, but then I realized, you know what, this is my list. I can put whatever villain I want on here as long as it qualifies. His goal is to make the world more beautiful. Is that the best he could come up with? His design may not be as stupid as most Team Flare members, but I know for a fact that I am not alone when I say that I knew he'd be the leader of Team Flare the instant I first saw him. With the fact that his name shares some similarities with the word flare, his uniform, his hair color, and how he desires to make the world a better place just like the team leaders of the past 3 generations. So when he revealed himself as a true villain, it came off as no surprise. And if you think about it, in the Y version his goals are hypocritical. He wants to kill everyone in the world so it'll stay beautiful. The world can't stay beautiful if everything in it is dead, and all the plant life would die off without any Pokemon or people around to give them carbon dioxide, so his plan to make a beautiful world would only make a hideous wasteland. By the way, when he gives you a chance to stop him if you press the right button, I knew that the blue button would be the one I'd have to press. Guys, don't make the button you want me to press be the same color your team wears. I felt pity for him when he died, but as a villain he's quite generic compared to most Pokemon villains. I did not find Beldon to be very good as a villain. Sure, she was the one who manipulated Grodus into resurrecting the Shadow Queen, and the one who tricked Peach into getting kidnapped, but other than that, she pretty much has no other impact on the story other than appearing in random points of Thousand Year Door. And even when she did, her plans usually failed because of her own Butterfinger's stupidity. I know that Beldon was more of a manipulative villain, but one of her goals is to steal the crystal stars from Mario, and she only attempts to do that in a few of the chapters. And then her design. She's one of the most repulsive things I've ever seen in the Mario franchise, and not in an intimidating way like Ganondorf, or in a classic way like Gruntilda. Grima was more intimidating than her. Also, I can see that she tortures Vivienne because the game wants us to feel sorry for her. And while I'll admit I did feel sympathy for Vivienne, Beldon is essentially a villain that's supposed to be halfway between serious and funny, and the way she presents this doesn't really blend really well together. She does give some character to some of the characters around her, but it doesn't do much for her own. She does learn her lesson at the end of the game, but they did a really bad job with her character development. The way she starts being nicer to Vivienne comes straight out of nowhere. If you want to show character development, you have to have some build up to her, like as in slowly start to regret her ways. You're probably thinking, why is she at number 3? Because of a personal story. When I did my Killjoys list about half a year ago, when I mistook the scene with them at Twilight Town for humor, one of the people who commented on me made me feel like one of the worst human beings in the world for thinking this. And while I'll admit I should have asked someone to help me with the script, this scene reminds me of the terrible memory, making me cringe even more whenever I see Beldum. Overall, Beldum actually had somewhat of a decent setup to be a villain, ruined for me by such a mediocre execution. She'll never evolve into a Metagross if she keeps this up. I think a lot of people will agree with me on this entry when I say that Xan Bay is just the worst villain in Final Fantasy history. At least from the games I've played. His design is worse than the other villain designs here. Just looking at that lame face combined with how stupid he's dressed. All we know from him before the final fight with him is that he's an evil wizard who betrayed his friends and wants to live forever. Which, I might add, is also one of the most overdone villain motivations in the world. Compared to villains like the Emperor and Kefka, this guy has nothing cool about him. Even before I found how stupid he was, I knew he would be an unimpressive villain. By the way, he's also one of those villains that constantly monologues. Yeah, it's very clear as to why Dissidia used Cloud of Darkness instead of him. This guy is just the lamest Final Fantasy villain ever. He's pretty much the living definition of unoriginal villain. But why is he high on the list? Because most of the villains in this list at least have something to redeem themselves as a villain, but I cannot find a single awesome thing about Xan Bay. He has pretty much no redeeming qualities whatsoever. The only reason he's not number 1 is because there aren't as many bad things with him as the number 1 entry on the list.
These things don't come out, you're dead!
Xan Bay may have been a lame villain, but number 1 does such a terrible job at being a villain that just thinking about her makes me lose a tiny bit of faith in the franchise. That is Lady Maud from The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes, also known as the Lady. I mean, just look at the villains in the previous Zelda games. We have a power-hungry ruler who took over all of Hyrule, a demonic mask that possessed the moon and sent it on a collision course towards the planet, a deranged psychopath, and an evil dictator. So what should we have here? How about a witch who's all like, "Oh, look at me, I'm so stylish!" and has literally no redeeming villain qualities with a lack of involvement with the story for most of the game. That is not how a Zelda villain should be. Zelda villains are supposed to be intimidating. I can see this as being played for laughs, but no, we're supposed to take it seriously. But how are we supposed to? Compared to taking over all of Hyrule and spreading chaos across the land, the worst that the lady did was force this jumpsuit onto some random princess and make her look like an ugly monkey. And then, the lady's design. For someone who loves fashion so much, she doesn't even look remotely pretty. She just looks like this ugly old hag, and not even a scary one either. And to think, I thought Link being a go-kart racer was degrading to Zelda's good name. And then the final fight with her. It's okay on a gameplay standard, but in terms of perspective, it's completely degrading. First phase, she creates a barrier that she can merely just throw Link over. She has an attack where she runs around swinging her umbrella back and forth like a lunatic. What kind of attack is that? That's just completely stupid compared to most Zelda villains' attacks. The second phase I don't have much to complain about since it's a twist on the whole Dead Man's Volley thing, making it feel somewhat fresh, but the third phase. It's good in terms of gameplay for how you use the umbrellas as platforms, and how only the links of the corresponding color can stand on them, but that doesn't do anything to help redeem her as a villain. What kind of Zelda villain's main method of attacking is with umbrellas? I'll admit, that does go in favor of her being a fashion-related villain, but that actually makes me hate her even more because of how even more out of place this is. Why is it that the one time they decided to have a female Zelda villain stay as the main villain and not have her get overshadowed by Ganon, it's the one time where I actually want Ganon to replace her as the antagonist? And just when you thought they couldn't insult a mostly serious franchise anymore, what do you have to do in order to undo the curse? You have to dress in the lady's clothes in order to restore Princess Scylla to her former self. Are you kidding me? Having Link dress up as a girl is embarrassing enough, but to have to dress up as a stupid old lady who thinks she's so fabulous in order to save the day? That's stupid! Even if this Link isn't related to the hero of Time Link, it still insults him in my eyes. I'm sorry this entry was long, but there was so much stupidity with her that just leaving out one thing would make me regret leaving that out. Lady Maud is unthreatening, lame, unoriginal, hard to take seriously, and is incredibly degrading to the Zelda franchise, and I don't want her to appear in any form of media ever again, not even in a cameo, because she is my #1 most hated villain in gaming history.